Hello, ladies and gentlemen, in Focus of Liberia land. We've got a good show for you today. We're going to be talking about the economic issues affecting our beloved country, Liberia. And with me today, I have some distinguished guests. Well, I can't call them guests because these guys are the hosts. We're Gabriel Carter. Hey, Gabriel, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Jimmy. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're indeed glad that you're here, man. You got to tell us all about the trip to the motherland.
Yeah, maybe we can do that on another show. But I think today we have a lot to talk about, especially hopefully we can go into the economic piece of the state of the nation. But yeah, there's a lot happening in Africa here. So we can actually, when I get back, we can plan a whole different show for that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Larry, I thought they would have recruited you by now.
I've been looking at the list for Larry's name. I've been flipping it back and trying to even read the letter backwards. Maybe
you two are no good.
But
yeah, we're still waiting.
I'm not in the inner circle. I'm on the I'm on the outer circle.
Outer circle. Don't worry, we'll get you. We'll force you inside.
Yeah. Well, you never know. It's been a big surprise. A lot of people, I hear a lot of discontent. A lot of people feel they've been left out. But I think it's something on our part that we clamor for these government positions. You know, I know this is a little bit off topic, but just before we get into the nitty-gritty, why, you gentlemen, I know the economic situation in Liberia is as such, but for us to be clamoring for government jobs, what does that reflect? What does that reflect, really? You guys are prominent economists. When we have a situation like we do in our homeland, that these jobs are coveted, they clamored, people doing everything to get them, you know, staging protests. What do you, Larry? What do you think about that? What does it show? What does it reflect?
You know, it shows that, first of all, there's no private sector. There's no developing private sector where people can say, oh, you know something, let me go and work in the private sector. But if you pay attention to it, they all seem to want, you know, they're either in one branch of the government at some point in time. If they're not in the executive branch working in one of the ministries, they will be in the legislative branch, representatives, senators, whatever the case may be. But pay attention, look at the whole landscape in the country. You see people who are once on the executive side, now they're senators, some are representatives. And you see people who were one time representatives and senators, now they're on the executive side looking for some ministerial job or to be appointed to some director position within the government. That tells you there is no private sector. This whole flip-flopping thing between executive branches, executive and legislative branches, it goes to show that the country is not developing at the rate, at the potential that it can actually develop at. So if we keep going in this circle, at the same time, the young people then keep the growth rate, the population growth rate, which is over 2%.
Yeah.
We have more young people graduating. It's going to come to a certain point where it's going to boil over. You can't have this number of young people unemployed in a country where there is no private sector. So that's what, to answer your question, Jimmy, that's what it tells me. We don't have a good, strong, vibrant private sector in the country right now. That's what's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree. Gabriel, we got graduates every day coming out of school. Are we molding them to be productive? Are we building the infrastructure? What do you think about all this clamoring for government jobs?
I think Larry said it perfectly. I said something and I will say it again. If it was up to me, every qualified local Liberian in Liberia will get a job before we give any diaspora Liberian a job. Why? Because because we in the diaspora are literally the middle class of that country. So if
Right.
you shut us out of there, it will force us to now look at the private sector or some way to develop the private sector because all of us here, that's why you're seeing the clamoring. People leaving from here going because they felt like they campaign, so they're entitled to a position, right? So everybody's just there now waiting around. They feel that because, hey, I was in the trenches, I deserve a job, right? And one of the reality they haven't picked up is that there's only so much position that are open. The most of the places are just civil servant and how many people can the president appoint, right? That's one. And I think the other thing perfectly like Larry said, which is the biggest, cream of the crop of the biggest problem, right? Is we don't have a private sector, right? To the point see right now when somebody gets a position in a government, we celebrate it as if this is some kind of achievement. Like we congratulate them, like as if, hey, you've made it, right? And besides the salary that are displayed, I don't know how much they get paid. It's not really much, right? But because there's no private sector, so if you get that little
Yeah.
one government job, we celebrate it. And the biggest problem, I think Larry said it, is that we need to create private sector. And every president we've had, nobody pays attention to that. They will make the rhetorical speech or the rhetoric speech that, hey, we're going to focus on the private sector. But the moment they get in and understand the impact of the reality, they get away from that. And we're back to,
Wow.
and this is why I said, give the local librarian in Liberia who are qualified the jobs within the government. It will force what it will do. It will force our hands in the diaspora that because we can't get in the government job in Liberia now, we will be forced to open businesses. We'll be forced to do businesses, and maybe that will help create a private sector. But Larry said it is we don't have a private sector, so everybody
Yeah.
focus just one place. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been this dispute that whether, you know, our rights as Liberians are being marginalized because we should be able to, participate in government or vote and all of that. And I agree with you. I think they should be given priority. But will that not strip Liberians of their rights?
It, let me answer this. I don't think it would strip us of our rights. So perfect example. Right now,
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm sure you're aware. You can get a Liberian passport, right?
Mhm.
Even if you hold a like U.S. passport, right? So it
Mhm.
allow you to go in and out of the country, travel across West Africa. That's a privilege. I don't know if you haven't, please do take advantage of that.
Right.
That's a privilege. But the reason why I'm saying it is because the I don't want to automatically assume that every one of us in the diaspora are more qualified than those that are there. right? It won't be shutting them out. If they're qualified, put them there. But it will. Now we have to create a private sector one way or another. Somebody have to force our hand to do it, right?
Right.
And for me, when I thought about that, I said maybe that will be the only way it will force our hands. Because right now, what is happening? Most of the people you see clamoring for a job, those are the people that left from the diaspora who literally just ran their way back there and were hoping to get jobs, right? Um, so somebody have to force our hand, whether the government is doing it or we ourselves have to take matter into our own hand. But I think the government has to do something. Um, I don't think that would be denying us our right, because we already have. You can go to Liberia, open a business. If you get your Liberian passport, you can travel in and out. You can do everything else. Denying you, I mean, not literally denying you job. You not getting a job in the government is, trust me, that's the is should be the least of your problem.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first here on FOL. We need to force diaspora Liberians to build our private sector. After all, they have the capital that is required. Why are they going home and competing for the few jobs that are there instead of they bring their expertise and capital to build our private sector? Our private sector is in dire needs to expand, and there's no other opportunities for Liberians. So we are contributing to the problem if we're not helping to build that private sector. You heard it here first from Gabriel Carter and Larry Kennedy. Let's delve into some of the other economic issues we're facing. There was a lot of brouhaha, gentlemen, the other day from the central bank. The government, the outgoing government claims to have left 40 million, while the incoming government claimed there was only half of that there. What was the reason for such their disagreement? Larry, you've been you're a banker, both of you bankers. What do you think led to such a disagreement, or why would it have even become an issue?
No, I think the president at the time was relying on hearsay and not waiting. You see, when someone's going to hand you any piece of information, you have to take it from a reliable source. So when President Boakai mentioned it, he was saying this is the money they had. I didn't hear the source of where it came from. I think, and that's why I said one time, I said it's kind of best to just wait. Let's get it directly from the central bank, because the central bank is the one who manages these accounts, right? So it was all hearsay. People were saying this, people were saying that. But you know something, Jimmy, here's the point. The problem is, whether it's 20 million, 40 million, for a country of 5-point-something million, that is absolutely nothing. So even granted they had like 100 million, that is still nothing, because you do not have enough money when we should be talking about you having at least $1 billion in your account. You're fighting over a difference of 20 million. You're wasting your time. You're absolutely wasting your time. But again, if they had just waited for what the CBO was going to put out, it would have cleared up a whole lot of this whole mess. And you know, in fact, I saw that the president appointed an economic advisor yesterday. I don't know much about who that person is, but someone told me that he's a former, well, I think he's an accountant by profession, and he does.
You got a name?
I think the name was. It was on Focus on Liberia's site. I think it was. Let me see if I see it on Focus on Liberia's site. Someone messaged it to me on my email. Molly Kamara, something like that.
Yeah, Kamara. I know it's a Kamara, but I don't know his first name.
Yeah. And someone was telling me that he has extensive accounting background. You know, one time he worked over at I think UBA bank in Africa, UBA bank in Africa. Yeah, so these are the kind of things that you're looking for, professionals to come in and provide economic advice to the president in terms of how to move the country forward. So that's good. I don't know much about this person, so I cannot vouch for him or know his experience. But it's one of those situations where you just kind of wait and see how the performance turns out. So yeah, to your question, Jimmy, they should have just waited, man. If they just waited until the CBL put the numbers out, we weren't going to have this back and forth, right? But whether it's 20 million, 40 million, that's still just a little drop in the bucket compared to how much they really, really need in order to get things moving.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but Gabriel, the president mentioned this in his State of the Nation address,
Mm.
and if the information was not verified and included in the speech, what does that what does that say?
So I had a very lengthy argument with somebody, a very big uh, supporter of the president. I, so imagine you coming into power and you're quoting numbers that are not accurate. It's not like you're in still the president elect still waiting to take office to say if you reach out to the central bank, they won't give you whatever information you're looking for. You're already in
That's right.
serving as the president. All you have to
Commander
do,
in chief.
right? So even if let's say you requested us the data, the statement, and it came from the central bank on some paper, you can have your transition team reach out to the central bank one to get the statement. If they provide you with that statement, you can reach out to whatever banks the accounts are being held to ask for actual statement, and they would have given that to you because you're the president elect. With that, you would have put forth the accurate information. But to just
Right.
rush to, like Larry said, where you just rushed and say, we have 20 million, like you literally split the number in half when there was, obviously more in the account. I think it's just laziness. It's like do the smaller things right, and then you will be able to do the bigger things right. If you can have your team do a simple task such as picking up a phone, calling central bank to verify data, or calling the bank to verify account information. There are a lot of complex things that are on your hand that you're going to have to deal with. So we had that argument, but I think Larry said, something that is very profound as well. There's so much ahead. There is, you know, in a way, like you said, it's immaterial to even argue over that
Mhm.
amount. In as much that it
Right.
might be a bigger amount, but it's immaterial to dwell on it. But I think for me, I think the fundamental part is doing the smaller things right, picking up the phone or having your team do the work they
Right.
need to verify information. So I
Right.
think that was a lapse on their part, and hopefully they can learn. There's so many mistakes from the beginning that we've seen so far. The inauguration, the 20 million snafu we're talking about here now. There's appointment, people fighting for jobs. So it started with chaos and it's progressing with chaos. So I hope they can
Mm.
pick up they
It's
can
just
pick up the ball,
embarrassing,
and
right?
it is very
Yeah.
embarrassing. It started with
Yeah.
chaos and continuing with chaos. So I hope they can pick up their pace and
It
miss
definitely
right.
is unprofessional, and whereby we have a lot of educated people in that group. We kind of wonder. But Larry, there was mention of new programs that the president wants to introduce, and then we see a meager 20 million, 40 million in the reserves. Where do you think, where will be the funding? What kind of resources do we have to fund new programs? Where do you think he might be able to get it from?
That's the one thing about leaders in Africa when it comes to power. Even before they come to power, in their presidential bid, or whether you're a senator, legislator, doesn't matter. They always promise the over promise, right? The over promise and under deliver. You see that all the time. You, I mean, you don't have the capacity. Number one, you don't have, for example, the whole bit with about 10,000 young people in technology within six
Yeah,
Yeah.
months.
yeah.
Do the math on it. How many instructors, highly technical instructors, you need to move
Hmm.
10,000 young people through an IT course? Let's say, for example, the course is going to last 4 weeks. Let's not go overboard and say, this is a 6, 8 week course, maybe 4 weeks. Or even let's say 3 week course. 3 week course is
Yeah.
not going to get you a job, right? How many technical people you need, and how many people can you, first of all, how many people can you actually put in an IT class? Because everyone is not going to have the same skill set, right? So people will be way advanced than others, and the people who are not advanced is going to slow down the entire class. So if you put, let's say 20, 25 people in one class, you're not going to get anything done in 4 weeks. It's going to really, really be slow. But you're talking about 10,000 people. So that is not doable. I'm not sure why it came out, but whosoever wrote this speech or whosoever advised the president, but the president should know better than to say, okay, I can have 10,000 young people trained. So that was it wasn't, I didn't think that he can afford it. But then there's so many other things that's being promised. If I remember correctly, he talked about, he went through his whole arrest agenda, which we've been hearing, right? This whole, yeah. But then where is the source of the funding? I know he talked about, some road work that's going to be done, some bridges and stuff. And he was saying that the money has already been laid out from the government of Japan. Well, there are two things when it comes to international development of funding. People can promise, they can put out some obligations. They can make promises, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to deliver on that money. So I don't know if they actually have the money right now, So there's a lot of stuff he did promise. He wanted to make a lot of changes. He wanted to make some amendments in the laws. And all those amendments and changes in the laws he's talking about, I was looking to see, okay, how is this going to boost economic activity? Some of them sounds like they may boost economic activity, but I didn't hear anything that would deal with like job creation. They're not going to get the money to do a lot of this stuff. Ellen tried it. She got a lot of funding from the U.S. government and international partners. She struggled. Weah came in, made a whole lot of promises. In fact, in the first 3 years, Weah received more aid from the U.S. government than Ellen. The Pro-Poor agenda was promising what? How many jobs did it? Gave her like 1 million jobs or so.
Yep.
Never
around there. And
at the end of the day, we heard it would create like what, maybe 27,000. Even if that was legit, we don't even know because they don't have a jobs data bank to track that stuff. So they make these promises, man, and he's not going to be able to meet those promises. Even the thing about no cars getting stuck in 100 days, like people are saying it's the dry season, maybe that's doable, but you just don't have the money to do it right now.
I think he's going to talk about the major roads, I guess, with the main roads.
The major roads, yeah, he said that it's the major roads.
Yeah. Gabriel, I don't know. I'm all for training and providing the skills for young people, but are we putting the cart before the horse? Do we not need to create a technology market for these people first? What is your taking on this promise?
So I think it was pretty much another, campaign, promise. I think it's where most presidential candidates, I don't think they thought it through. 10,000 techies, if you want to call them that, then you have to, most of us don't know a lot about computers, right? Larry's very good at it. I'm sure you have right. So the first question you ask when you hear that is, okay, what type of computer skills are you going to train? Is it basic Microsoft Excel, Words, and stuff like that,
right?
Or are you going
Entry
to start
level
training them in stuff like C++ or Python or all these coding stuff, and those courses, if you really want to be good at it, it takes at least 6 months to get a certification. Even the free ones that are on Google, like the Google certification, it takes about 6 months. Like Coursera, you go there, I think it takes about 6 months. Some last up to 9. It takes about 9 months. So you say you're going to do that. What is it in? What does he say? I think 6 months or so, right? You have to look at the time frame, right?
Someone's posting here saying it's 1 year. I thought I read 6 months, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So even with that, now that's okay. Let's say we can give him the benefit of the doubt to say a year. How are you going to leverage those people? Where are you going to put them? Where are you going to hire them? What are they going to do? Are you going to now set up a data hub? Are you going to set up a data hub where they're employed to do what we call these international work for other people, or they can set up profile on Upwork or Fiverr where they can do freelance work? Is that what like you can't just say things without having a thought out process for it. Like you gotta have a plan. Oh, when we train these people, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're getting the money from. This is where we're getting. I think Larry mentioned that this is where we're getting the teachers from that are going to do that. We've recruited this many Liberian who are IT professionals that are going to train them for such and such amount. Once they train them, we're going to set, like, you have to just narrate things through, right? And the other part he left out is, what are you going to get the money from, right? So for me, when I heard that, I say, hey, let's say he can even come up with the money. Where are you going to employ these people? Are you going to put them through government offices and all of that? So for me, I just thought there was no need for that. It was, eh, there was no need to that. He should have stuck with the pressing issues such as the economy, things that are supposed to boost the economy into, and really get things off the ground from where we are. So that was my thought on that. Yeah.
I agree. I heard one critique I've been hearing of the State of the Nation address was that they expected a more explicit roadmap. How will we achieve? How does he plan to get to the goals? Not simply promising a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but how are we going to climb that rainbow to get to the other side? I heard that critique that it wasn't mentioned. But one strategy he may have, he has now appointed a new director of the LRA, the Liberian Revenue Authority.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps the vision of this new chief may be where he thinks he can generate more revenue. Larry, what are your insights about the new LRA chief?
So let me touch on something real quick because I see Henry Doyle, and I'm glad Henry Doyle is here watching this show. But let me read this part right here from the annual message. So he says, in our quest to expand the economy, we will leverage information communication technology, ICT, in creating jobs, especially for our youth. To achieve this, my administration would train up to 10,000 young people in various digital skills in the first half of 2024. So that means the first 6 months of 2024, exactly. Not 1 year of 2024, like you posted, Henry. And he talked about digital skills in the first half of 2024. So like what Gabriel just mentioned, all right, great. You are successful in training them. What now? Where are you going to place them?
Right.
Or do we have the opportunity? So that leads to your question, Jimmy. The LRA doesn't have the policies to create jobs or to boost revenue. What they can do, they can come up with a strategy in terms of how to collect revenue. They can improve the revenue collection process, right? Because there's so many opportunities in there where there are people who should be making their payments to revenue, but those people are not making their payments. So LRA can come up with a strategy to boost revenue collection. But in order to boost revenue collection and boost the revenue, you need to have economic activity where people have jobs that would generate income, and that income would be used to go and purchase things in the market. And then things that are being purchased in the market now will be used to pay taxes. That's how you get the revenue generation. So it's that whole Keynesian model, right? So John Maynard Keynes talked about this in some of his research, that by boosting economic activity, you will end up having more people get jobs, and those people will in fact take their income, spend it, whether it's in a market. The farmers, the market women now will have to go to the farmers to go and purchase more produce to bring to the market, and the farmers now will hire more people to go and work in the farm. It's this whole downstream effect that leads to economic activity and economic growth. So I don't think the Revenue Authority have any policies in place. The two job creators in the country, the two sectors that can create jobs, are the folks on the monetary policy side, which is the central bank. Mm-hmm. But you have a guy at the central bank in a 10-year position who was a glorified security guard at JP Morgan, a compliance officer, nothing more than a glorified security officer.
That's right.
And then you have someone now on the fiscal side, which is the finance ministry, which we're going to give an opportunity to Boakai Kamara because we've had him on FOL. But he's more on the policy hard economic side of things.
Yeah.
What you need,
Fiscal side. Yeah.
exactly. So what you need someone with a blend of economic sense, practical experience, knowledge, and also financial sense, practical experience, and knowledge, because you need financial instruments to be able to get money from people who want to save it, to people who want to borrow it. And those young people who borrow it now will turn around, invest it, start a business. That is what leads to economic growth. So LRA, yeah, they're there to actually collect the money, but I can see them having policies to actually boost any economic activity whatsoever.
Wow. Yeah. So, Gabriel,
Yes.
New bosses, as Larry pointed out just now, there's just a certain amount they can do. So, how then, or what do you think this a change of personnel will do for the new economy?
Well, I think from a fiscal side, I think we have a little bit of we can give Boakai a little bit of benefit of the doubt, right? Because he's the reason why, because he's been there before. To you know Now, in terms of what he's going to do as a minister of finance to increase revenue, that is something he has to figure out, whether he's going to do anything with taxes, or uh, since we have this quasi bank LBDI, whether he's going to really sit down with the board to create some, like Larry keeps saying, right, to really empower this bank to be able to get money out of people's hand, to 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 create some kind of investment scheme, or even to target the diaspora Liberian to get that money into the country, so it will help the Ministry of Finance. Whether he's going to think along that line, that is yet to be determined. I think um, uh, when we had him on FOL, one of the questions that Larry asked him was, about try to fix the country's credit rating. That's something that he can get started with. I think, well, Larry can keep me honest if I'm wrong. I think it takes about 10 years or so to get that fixed, right? He may not be there when it happened, or if they win a second term, it could be something that materializes in the second term, if they win, right? So he can also work with the LRA boss in terms of making it easy for companies to not just register, but to be able to pay taxes, to digitize the entire, um, the LRA process, where it's
Mhm.
easy to register. You can be in anywhere and register. You can know what your taxes are depending on the kind of revenue you bring in, and pretty much just make it easy for people to register businesses. That way, more taxes will flow within. So he has, in terms of, from an economic side or fiscal side, he has a little bit of leeway on his side. For the LRA people, there's not really, they just, uh, I don't want to call them glorified tax collector, but they're just tax collector. They just got to
Right.
be efficient in terms of
Pretty
getting
much is
the
it.
tax, exactly, getting tax revenue from where it's supposed to be. It
Right.
should be, collected from. So that's on SID. And I think we're saying the same thing here. The other aspect of that is the the central bank governor. There's so much power this individual has, but I don't think we have placed people in that position who knows how to leverage that power
Yes.
on
And
the
have the
fiscal side.
wherewithal, the
We
wisdom, and
had
the
Right. We
knowledge
had
to do
Mel
it.
Jones, who just thought,
Yeah.
hey, I can just go out and take money and go give it to market women. Right. So if we can really sit down, like when these guys were getting into power, I know they were going to win, or even when they won, I said the best person who could have sat at that role as the central bank governor could have been Antoinette Sayed, the second in command at the IMF right now. She would have been very efficient, or even put somebody like Larry there, right? Um,
Hmm.
you know, he would have been able to figure. These two people could have been able to. Any of them could have been able to figure this thing out in terms of understanding the power and creating and leveraging that power to really, because that's all we need, right? So for me, I think those are the two most important people, that and the Minister of Commerce. So he has a little bit
Oh,
of power.
good, very good. I'm glad. That's a great
Yeah,
segue
you're right,
because
Gabriel, the Minister of Commerce too.
yes,
Yeah.
I was but just about to touch that, Gabriel. You look
Yeah.
like you're reading my mind. But before I
Take it
go
away.
there, I was a student briefly of Mills Jones. He was a boy wonder, mind you. I think he got a PhD at about 23 or 24.
Yeah.
The guy was supposed to be the smartest ever, and when he taught us, he thought we were the dumbest people in the whole world. I mean, he was a young guy. I understand, but he didn't give us much credit. And this was
Yeah.
our 101, Economics 101. So he taught at LU this one year. He had forgotten when I mentioned it to him. Then he remembered he only taught one class and that was it. But
Oh, boy.
selection of personnel, just what you said, all he did, somebody who you think is so brainy, he didn't show that wizardry in his performance at the bank. But
Let me
here
say
we
this
have
quickly,
one.
right? Let me say this quickly. Here's one thing that I think, and I could be biased for this. Here's something that I think we make a problem. We equate somebody being smart as somebody having work ethics. Just because you went to school and get all these degrees and doesn't mean you have work ethics. Work ethics, it proves a lot anyway. But that's what I want to say. So you have all these people
Right.
who are qualified, but to be
Right.
able to come in and understand that Liberia is not a country where you can just go sit in the office and roll up your sleeve with AC blowing on you, and you have to
I
roll up
totally
your
agree.
sleeve and want to work, and that's what we're looking for. But anyway,
Yeah,
go
in
ahead.
fact, I went to somewhere I read that said all the C students, they end up becoming the CEOs, and why they employ the A students to work for them. I read that somewhere a long time. But how about the selection of Amin Modad for Commerce? I was impressed by his confirmation, his answers he gave. He knew his subject, and I knowing him personally, this guy's been doing business in Liberia for a while. He knows the landscape of commerce in Liberia. It's been up and down, and he's managed to weather the storm. What do you think the promises of the new commerce minister, Larry?
You see, I don't know. I know, I mean, background has been a business person. I don't know much in terms of anything other than that. But that business background, I think, is going to help him tremendously in terms of what he needs to do. But sometimes, Jimmy, it's not so much in terms of the just the person coming in, but it's also in terms of the people who is going to surround this person that are going to bring in. Right? Yeah. If you just come in and you are going to give, be sort of that top down. You want to micromanage everybody. You can't be everywhere at all times, right? So I've heard so many good things about Amin. I kind of figured that in that role, I expect him to do well. But his biggest challenge will be how much does he knows about international commerce? How much does he knows about how to drive foreign direct investments to a country? Because foreign direct investments to Liberia has fallen almost by half from 2016, 2017, 2015, 2016 or so. Not even like 2009. So now foreign direct investments to Liberia has fallen. What is the strategy he's going to use now to drive foreign direct investments to Liberia? Because commerce is pretty much the gateway to the Liberian economy, right? So we're going to wait to see what that is all about. And I like this question that you posted up here. Is there any data that will support exactly or will indicate how many jobs need to be created in Liberia and what sectors? You see, that's a great question. And this is something that if you follow FOL, what Gabriel, Jimmy, Depu, Alex, and all of us been talking about, if you don't have any data to support what you're saying, and I always say this, right? Because I remember this, you're just another person with an opinion if you don't have anything to back it, because you need raw data. You need it to drive the intelligence you need in terms of knowing where you're going. But that's the big problem we don't have in Liberia. We don't have an economic data bank to store. This is what ListGIS is supposed to do, the Liberia Institute of Statistical Geo something. This is what it's supposed to do. But the previous administration turned them into a political mess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They literally didn't do what they were meant to do. They didn't get properly funded because they're supposed to do all this statistics gathering. But he's absolutely right. We do not have, not that I know of, Liberia relies on data from the World Bank or the IMF or the African Development Bank to tell them where their economy stands. The way they calculate unemployment to Liberia is a disservice to the people, because they're counting Yana boys in as being fully employed, and that's nonsense. That's why when you look at the unemployment rate in Liberia, sometimes it's even better than the unemployment rate in the U.S. It is always so low, because if you have outside, you have a widow market or something, they say you're fully employed, which is
that's underemployed, right?
Yeah.
That's called being underemployed.
Yeah, we need to have a true economic data bank. You need to build that stuff so you can be able to know exactly where you're heading. So yeah, to your question, man, I think Amin would do well depending on who he surrounds himself with, but he doesn't know anything about driving foreign investments to Liberia. Then I think they're going to struggle. But he's got smarts for a business.
Great. And so Gabriel, I've been I left engineering for the past 3 years doing data science and the application to improving network. Actually, data science is something that you can apply anywhere. Today, we all know data is king in America. And so you would think maybe these technologists that they're being trained, we could start teaching them how to collect data, because we need data to inform our decisions. All these things we're doing, without the data to inform the decision, you're guessing. Just like Larry just said, you're guessing. So what do you think will we get better results now if the fact that we don't have data? Do you think there's even a possibility of getting better results now?
So let me, I will get into that, but let me start with the Minister of Finance, Commerce.
Yeah.
I think we have hope that's all we can have. We have hope. We know, has a business background, but I think there's a other part of that, we're not looking at, which is, does he understand how to drive? I think Larry said how to drive foreign direct investment into the country. Does he understand the country's advantages? Like, meaning, what are the selling point that he can sell to Liberia? Other foreign direct investors who want to come in to invest in this country. Meaning, literally, how you become like the sales pitch or sales managers for the country. You working along with the National Investment Commission should have like a proposition, a business proposition, a sales proposition, a competitive proposition for the country, that anybody you go in front of saying why Liberia makes good business sense for their business, whether regardless of what. So you have to not only understand that, right, but to be able to articulate that, right? Perfect example here, like these things we look at. Gina Raimondo from right in Rhode Island. She was the governor of Rhode Island. That state is so small that they were losing this. It sits right in the middle of Massachusetts, where I live, and Connecticut and New York. So there were businesses that were leaving from there, going to either New York or Connecticut, or coming to our state, Massachusetts. She took over and transformed that state to make it very competitive, right? It's known for a lot of corruption in our country as well. One of the most corrupt states. She
transformed. Could you mention one or two things, some provisions she made to change the direction of things?
I don't know exactly, right? But that's what got her, to become commerce minister in Biden administration, right?
Okay.
So she left from there and became minister of commerce in Biden's administration. So meaning that the point that I'm trying to make here is that you have to understand what the competitive advantages are at your state. What tax break are you going to give people? A perfect example that Sam Waller mentioned here. One of the biggest problems we've had in Liberia is monopolies. We've had monopolies on our rubber. We have monopolies in our rice. We have monopoly right now in the importation. There's only one port, right? There's a monopoly. One person controls it, so they can set any price, which is a gateway to our economy. So you have to think about all of those things. How do you make the country more advantageous, not just for regionally, but globally, if you want to think about it. But I would say focus on globally. I mean, regionally, make Liberia more competitive. Now, the question becomes, how do you sell that country? And for me, that is something we're waiting to see. The second piece on the data part of it, come to think about it now, I hope when JBA administration trains these kids in tech, that their focus, they will employ them to be data collectors.
Yeah.
If we have 10,000 data collectors, put at least 500 of them at central bank because we need data. Put some of them
Right.
at the Ministry of Commerce, but like just spread them in the ministries to just collect data, which, like you said, is a gold mine that we actually need in every ministry, and it will help us make informed decisions. So that's my point on that. Yeah.
Right. And we're looking at there's a good thing that we could do, and this is when he mentioned that he was going to train techies. Let's call them techies for now.
Mm-hmm.
I say yes, it's good, but to what direction? Because there's just what you gentlemen say. They could be help desk people. They could be learning Python or whatever the newest or AI. There's so many directions they go. You need to direct them, in a certain direction so that we can make the most out of it. And just for you gentlemen pointing out, we need data. We need data. We need data. And the massaging and the manipulation of data, the querying of data, all of that is a skill and science all by itself. But we don't know. I don't know if they do. Are they making studies? Are they doing what is informing our people that they come up with these ideas? What is informing them? Larry?
Well, besides using the wrong assumptions, they're just doing it based on like a prayer. That's all it is. But I wouldn't have said like I was training 10,000 people. I probably would have keep it to something more realistic. Maybe I can train within the next 6 months, maybe about 2,000 people. And if you pay attention to what Gabriel said earlier, so if I'm going to train like 2,000 people, the strategy would be, okay, I'm going to train them in skills that I can have them doing something on Fiverr, right? So they can be freelancers on things like Fiverr. If they haven't heard about it, well, they will learn about it quickly. And also like Upwork, like what Gabriel mentioned. You want them to be freelancers where they can kind of start up, but you also teach them how to start a legit business, because here's to be a legit business. Sure, you can be the freelancer and all, but people will not come to you because they're not sure of your capabilities. So you want to set up your own little website, put some testimonials and stuff on it, and then do that. But then also you can say I would train maybe about 1,000 or 2,000 people within the government to build their capacity, and then teaching them in things like Office 365. Because one of the major issues in Liberia, we always hear they don't have the capacity. So I would train them in those areas. In terms of the data collection, you can set up a little data hub, right? Because in order to do data collection, you need to learn things like SQL, right? Structured query language. You need to learn Python. Python is easy to learn. It's not something, you have to be like a rocket scientist to kind of do Python. You can also learn things like Snowflake, right? Things like SQL, Snowflake, all those things that help build up a data warehouse to do that stuff. But you have to start collecting your own data. You're not having a source. Because then you will be able to pay attention to what is driving your economy. You will know, if you don't know what is driving your economy, what is
exactly,
you're not going to know.
Right. And but to your point, Larry, there's also software like Tableau, like Splunk, that do all the querying for you.
So once you mastered like SQL, Python, then you can create the visualizations in Tableau or even in Power BI, and you can make. Look, man, I can bring up a Power BI thing right now, and I can tell you exactly what a Liberia's budget can be doing. And that's how you kind of look at data to make decisions, right? Because I can have my dashboard right here, or even in Tableau. Tableau is extremely powerful when it comes to that. But they got some big problems. They have some big problems to the point that Gabriel made. in terms of the monopolies, the
Yeah.
right. If you look on the executive management website, every administration that comes in year after year after year, they are issuing executive orders to make sure that the rice importers do not pay tariffs. That is nonsense. You need free enterprises to be able to, if you have a lot of people bringing rice into the country, the price of rice is going to fall. Judge Weah then tried this thing with fixing the price of rice.
Mhm.
That price fix led to a shortage of rice on the market, and you saw women standing on long lines. You saw a
Yes,
lot of
I
people
remember
standing.
that.
You saw that. Price fixing doesn't work. So the other big problem they have is what is taking place outside of Liberia.
Yeah.
What is taking place in Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia, if anybody pay attention to it, we know that a lot of agricultural products come from Ukraine.
Ukraine.
It was interesting watching, I can't sure who was testifying before the U.S. Congress, and one of the representatives said she was shocked that nearly 37% of the entire world's agriculture comes from Ukraine. No,
Wow.
it was shocking. So the price of agriculture products in Liberia is also influenced by the war in Ukraine. Liberia
Right.
one time was expecting, I think, rice or something to come from India, but
Yeah.
India changed their mind because they came out
Yes.
and said we need rice ourselves.
Right. Right. I
You know?
remember that.
Yeah, and then the other thing that is killing the poor people in Liberia is the the devaluation, the loss of value of the Liberian dollars. One USD is equal to the 190 LRDs right now. Every time the LRD loses value, food prices become more expensive for the poor people. It impacts the poor people more than people who has money because the poor people spend a larger percentage of their income on the necessities of food. So Boakai has to deal with the devaluation of the Liberian currency. He has to pay attention that the U.S. right now is trying to help Israel in the Israel-Hamas war to fund Israel and even have some humanitarian aid for Hamas, for not Hamas, for the Palestinians. Then you look at what's happening also with the U.S. spending a ton of money in Ukraine to help Ukraine stave off Russia.
Yeah.
Then you see the latest strike that the U.S. hit with Iran because 3 American soldiers died.
Yeah.
And you see how people in Yemen, these rebels in Yemen, are attacking
Houthis.
ships that are
Yeah.
coming through the Red Sea, going through the Suez Canal. There's so much going on. When Boakai started naming all of these international agencies that he expected to get money from, the EU, the AFDB, the World Bank, I was saying, that stuff
You're,
has
you're,
never developed. It's never worked. It's never worked. Liberia has received, over the past 40 years, Liberia has received $15 billion from the United States government. How do I know? It's on the USAID's website. 15 billion. Where is Liberia today? GDP per capita is like around $700. And that is all in the extractive sector. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you would see for the ordinary Liberian. So we need to change this strategy, man. Boakai is he's using the same old school strategy that hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. Yeah, I got you. Gabriel,
Mm.
we're talking about maybe a whole change, like what Sam Wallow says here. The Investment Commission and soon the Tourism Bureau need to be departments within the Ministry of Commerce. Let's revisit the drawing board. Let's go back to the drawing board. Do we need to restructure our ministries and everything so that it caters to the current demands we have and the current situation we have? Do we need to revisit all these things?
Now, I don't think I agree with the 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 investment commission. If you say you want to put the investment commission with the commerce, I will understand, but to combine it with the tourism, um, and for me, I think even if we want to do that, right, it should be maybe something we'll look at in maybe 2 years from now, in the fourth year or fifth year, right? The reason being because there is so much that is going on right now economically that you like from a priority standpoint. right? There's so much that you need to do right now that the economy needs, and I think he mentioned it in his speech as well, right? There's the economy needs rebooting right now. And those are the things he's supposed to be focused on. Like once you focus on that, you get those priorities straight, whether the economy is, thriving a little bit, then you can now look and say, okay, now let's restructure. Now that this is taken care of, let's restructure these departments if you want, or these or
Okay.
ministries if you want to, and then we can, but I think from a priority standpoint, that
Yeah.
shouldn't be something you look at right now. That should be something you put off maybe 2 years or 3 years from now, because I don't think that is priority. Liberian people don't care whether you shift this and this and that. The question becomes, even if you want to do that, what is it going to do for the economy? How efficient is that going to make your government, right? So that's the first thing you need to think about, right? And this second question is, what do I need to do right now from an economy
Hmm.
standpoint, from an economic
Right.
standpoint, in
Very
order
good.
to
You
get
in
things
front of the president. He said,
right,
Mr. Carter, what do we need to do now to boost this economy?
right. So those are the things you have to start. I don't think shifting these things around should be priority right now. I think
Right.
if you look at the economy right now, he highlighted most of the things that I need fixing. The unemployment, right out the gate, I wanted to hear, hey, we have unemployment issue in this country. For the last 6 years, this government hasn't really employed people. Well, from their own statistical standpoint, it was 27,000 people. From what we're seeing in the economy, this is not true. What is happening? This is what my government is going to do. That A, B, C, and D, like from the next first and 6 months or to a year.
Hmm.
But you saying yes, you say you're going to train 10,000 people in the first 6 months. How is that? The question becomes, we keep asking, how is that going to help your economy? So for me, I think shifting departments around is not a priority right now. Your priority should be, I think Larry highlighted some of these things. We are at 20, the budget right now is 625 million, right? For this year. If you can even get it up to 650, let's say I will give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll call it even at 650. You you have made rounds at all these multinational development banks, the MDBs. You came to the US, solicited money, right? Investments. You owe, I think, 650,000 or 600,000 to the Japanese, that payment that you're supposed to make in order for them to release 13 million to finish the Gabriel Tucker breach, right? Now, you can go to the Japanese. The Japanese are not at war. So you can say, hey, maybe they'll be able to, if you pay that money, they'll be able to release it to you. But the other, like the US, there's so many things they're juggling right now. You are the last person on their list. There's so much they're juggling. The IMF, you've already defaulted, right? You already defaulted. So they're going in as much that they know that you've been in government for 40 years and you're coming in with a new administration, somewhat new. They want to see that this is somebody we can trust to lend money to before they even start making, you know, before they even start lending money to you. So you have to figure out from your own standpoint right now. I need to prove myself that I can manage money. I can handle, loans that they're going to give me before they'll give it to me. So in that case, I would say this and I'll learn quickly. The only option you have is domestic revenue mobilization. How do I
Mm.
mobilize domestic revenue? What fiscal or monetary policy do I need to make that will help maybe in the next year or so boost the revenue to maybe 700 million or even 800 million, and prioritize that accordingly to the budget. And now when the partner the international partner sees that, they will say, okay, this is someone who is serious. This is somebody we know that has a good administration, that if we continue to release money or loans, that he will prioritize these loans in with great investment. This is why George Weah government didn't have. This is why he depended on loans and at a low level, and he ended up borrowing his way out.
Right.
Right. So for me, those should be the priorities. Your priority should be domestic revenue mobilization. Prove yourself. Then you can take that. This is who I am card to your international partner, and they will do all they can to help your government grow. Right.
Yeah, gentlemen, I always felt that when we borrow to pay salaries, it should be illegal almost. I figure any kind of money we borrow should be used to generate more investment, more money, increase productivity within the country. When the president elect came through, um, a brother, an African American brother, called me. He said, "Is he going to visit the Black Caucus, or is he going to build? We have some organizations here that see Liberia as an extension to itself, but they don't see Liberia taking advantage. They wonder why they are going to Ghana, they're going to Kenya, and they can't understand why why Liberia is not forthcoming in this direction. Do you think we need to look toward different sources, Larry, different unconventional sources than the usual IMF? I think, are we really exploring our vast leverage we have in the world?
Jimmy, my friend, you are on point. In fact, you are just kind of, what you're saying is kind of running parallel to what I see the gentleman, Houston C. Brooks, is posting here on the chat. What you're saying, Jimmy, is here, and Houston is right here. And those are the ingredients we need to fix this country. Because you can't keep going the same route. Because you mentioned the Black Caucus, right? There's an opportunity in there to boost tourism if you tap into the Black Caucus. How do I know? I was talking to Judge Bill Littlejohn in Houston, and he kept telling me, Larry, the Black Caucus down here, he said, we want to have trips to Liberia and boost tourism. He said, we have a lot of African Americans that do not want to go to Ghana. They want to come to Liberia to boost tourism. And I said, okay, let's make it happen. I called a few people in Liberia. I still haven't heard back from anyone yet. And he is on his way to Liberia. So when he gets there, he's going to try to see if he can make his own contacts. And this was the man who made a whole lot of things happen for the former city mayor, Jefferson Koji. But in order to make this happen, you need the government to create the environment, like what Houston is saying. Part of the environment will include like security. If you look at the State Department's website, then you look at Liberia security, because a lot of Americans want to go to a country, they would get advice from the U.S. State Department that would advise them in terms of the security risk. Liberia is sitting at the same security level like places like the Dominican Republic and some other countries. Why are people flocking over to Dominican Republic and not to Liberia? Because even though they have the same security risk, but some of the warnings that Americans are hearing is far worse for Liberia as it is for the Dominican Republic. But we can change that. There are 5 things that really need to do to get this, to bump this thing up. But Gabriel, to your point, I would in fact get rid of, you see, the fact that the recurrent expenditures is strangling any government that comes in play. The recurrent expenditure, it strangles them. It doesn't leave a whole lot of money to do the development work.
Yeah.
You have to do several things at the same time. Right now, and I mentioned this the other day, I would not fill all of those positions right now, unless there's a position that he needs to fill that is required by statute, by a law. But other positions, I would not fill those positions and try to reduce. And the finance minister can tell you how much money the government is going to save by not filling certain positions.
That's a
Simply take the people who are there right now who actually do the work, because a lot of these directors and the assistant ministers don't do the actual work. Train some other people to fill those positions. Do away with some of those things, reduce your expenditures. I would get rid of the gender ministry and let the Ministry of Health deal with those issues. Strengthen the Ministry of Health to deal with gender-related issues. Gender ministry was never in Liberia in the past. It's something new under Madam Sirleaf's administration. Get rid of the gender ministry. You don't need it. And let the Ministry of Information eventually dissolve, because every ministry should have its own spokesperson.
Yeah.
You don't need to have, so you get rid of the gender ministry, you get rid of the Ministry of Information, have a tourism board. You don't need a ministry for that. Have a tourism board that will oversee.
It is a great suggestion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't hire all these 2,000-3,000 people you're looking to hire to put on payroll, because you already complained about recurring expenditures. So get rid of that stuff. So you
Right.
now with the fiscal side of things. Then to boost investment, you have to look at how, like you just mentioned, Jimmy, how can I tap the diaspora, or how can I tap tourism to my country? There are ways. There's so many ways to do it, but you know, in fact, you know what's really sad? The U.S. government wrote an extensive report on how to drive tourism to Liberia. I've read that report so many times. I look at it and say, what is that? The US government spent all this money on the Ellis administration with a complete strategy. What you have to do, step 1, 2, and 3 to drive tourism. It was never implemented.
Wow.
And to Gabriel's point, tap the diaspora to drive remittances back to Liberia. There are things you can do, but the people will want to see results quickly. What are those low-hanging fruits, like
Right.
people like to say? But if you're coming back with the same old strategy, looking to borrow from the IMF puts you in an extended credit facility program.
Yeah.
You can only borrow through concession agreement. You're in a bind. You're messed up. You can't go to the sovereign debt market like what Ghana did. And I think, Gabriel, you're the one who told me, you posted somewhere that, was it Ivory Coast or some other country raised like billion?
8 billion.
It was oversubscribed.
It was, yeah, it was, the initial issue was 2.6 billion. It will oversubscribe by up to $8 billion. So
look at all that money
tells
people
you.
want to pump into Ivory Coast. Why?
Yeah.
Because Ivory Coast probably have more stable economy. Ivory Coast probably have a more reliable judiciary system. And those are all the things you need to drive for a direct investment.
Yep.
Judiciary system cannot be as corrupt as we have it in Liberia. But Houston C. Brooks made a valid point. Set up the environment and get out of the way. That's what the U.S. government did. The U.S. government struggled for years. Even when I'm sorry, I'm going too far. Just give me like
No, go ahead.
Even when the market crashed back in 1929, the Great Depression came onto the U.S. in 1929. When the U.S. came out of the Great Depression, like in 1933, 1934, they rolled out some programs to make sure it doesn't happen again. And one of them was something led by, there was a law passed called the Glass-Steagall Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
Glass-Steagall Act also had embedded in it the FDIC. So the FDIC gave people a little bit more security to want to invest.
Right, so the banks don't crash.
Yeah, but what the Glass-Steagall Act did was it said, look, investment banks, you cannot be doing business with commercial banks. It separated the two because people felt that was the whole shenanigans, investment bank and commercial banks doing the whole shenanigans. But things like the Federal Home Loan Bank, it helped boost the American economy. Things like the Sallie Mae Student Loan Mortgage Association, it helps students get money to go to college. Things like Fannie Mae and Freddie. We know Fannie Mae and Freddie created that opportunity where people can buy, where banks can recapitalize, meaning a bank lends me money to go and buy a house and set up that mortgage. The bank is no longer going to have that money, but the bank can turn around and sell that mortgage now to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, get that money, and be able to lend it to someone else.
Yeah.
That's why you can have 15, 20, 30-year mortgages in America, but you can't even have the same thing in Liberia because you don't have that program in place. So, that's where you need some sort of a financial intermediation in Liberia to get things rolling. But like they say in Sastan, we shall see. Nimeju, we're gonna see.
I say, Gabriel. What about commodities on the market? Where some people say we're just this far away from a shortage, like things like rice or petroleum. Do you think the government should produce a system or a policy that will ensure the commodities like rice or petroleum doesn't get short? Do you think there's certain things that government can do so that the economy doesn't face another downturn?
Yeah, and man, that's a great question. So I'll take you back to Madame Saliv, I think it was a speech she actually gave when she first took over. there are certain aspect of the free market economy that she says she doesn't agree with, right? She was actually, she loved the policy of Tolbert, right? She just thought, hey, Tolbert went about it the wrong way. You know, he's the way he did his politics was just wrong, but his policy was right. The reason why I say this is because in I'm a big proponent of free market enterprise as well, right?
Hmm.
But also, I'm also a big believer that government needs to be able to subsidize. Like the reason why I'm saying is because we need to be able to subsidize our agriculture sector, food production,
Right.
right?
At
The
least to get it
farm
started.
people, those who produce food,
Yeah.
right? Subsidize it. Even when they're fully fledged, we should continue to subsidize them to be able to feed ourselves, right? And this is something that the likes of the World Banks, the IMF, and all these MDBs do not want, right? And this is
Hmm.
why actually the former president Salif spoke against it. Another reason why I say that is because food, which is a rice, uh, gas, these are national security issues, right? Forget the gas, food, rice. We should have a reserve of rice. The government should have reserve of rice, right? Where it should be fully replenished based on the number of population we have at every given time, right? Now, if you don't have local producer producing that, the one you're importing, you should have a reserve. Buy it cheaply and have a reserve somewhere. Because the last thing you want, you know how we don't play with our rights, but the last thing you want is having rice shortage and people going on the market. I feel the same way about fuel as well. See, this country we're in, the United States, they have an insane reserve of fuel, of of
Oh
of
yeah.
of of gas, right?
Yeah.
We don't think about these things, right? If we were thinking in that light, where we see these things as national security threats, right? We will remove the monopoly, right? Because let's say you and I and Jimmy are the only people allowed to import rice here. We can collude within ourselves and say, you know what?
That's right.
Let's reduce the number of
Right.
quantity of
Price
rice to
fixing.
import, right? And we
Yeah.
would do that and we seem on the market as if there's a shortage of rice. Why? Because we have this agreement with the government that only allow only the three of us to import
Right.
rice. So we can do that. And what does that do? The government, in another sense, in a much that they think that they have this collusion with these three people to import rice, they're shooting themselves in the leg. They're literally putting themselves at advantage without knowing that because these three people can collude without putting rice on the market and it could become disadvantage to you. The same thing happening to fuel. This is why you see in America, the telecom has been deregulated, the telecom communication. This is why you see like the T-Mobile, the Metro PCS, the Obama phone that you can find at Walmart. This is why you're able to see all of that. Like these things are being deregulated because it takes the way, it makes it easy for anybody like you and myself. If you have enough money, you can start a telephone company, you can
Right.
start, right? We need to do the same thing because these are national, especially for our rights and the way the people that were allowed to import gas and fuel into that country, even cooking gas, because these are national security threat. But we're not thinking in that light. We just
But let me
see,
ask you, Gabriel, before you
right,
continue, before you
right,
land,
right,
people use economies, what they call it, monopolies, because they want to take advantage of economies of scale. Like you mentioned telecom, I've been in telecom 20 some more years. It
right.
lends itself towards economies of scale. The bigger more subscribers you can you service,
Right.
the less expensive it becomes per the cost per
Yep.
subscriber. So
Right.
economies of scale work. But
Right.
what what lured the government? What would have lured the government into giving monopolies to certain people? I don't see how economies of scale would benefit in this direction. What do you think?
So,
Why did the government subject themselves to this thing?
so quick history. I worked for a telecom, I think for about 6 months, intern there, right? So what I used to
Yeah,
do is, it's called Granite Telecom. The guy is a billionaire now in Massachusetts, right? He buys these big lines from like the likes of T-Mobile, Verizon, and resells them to the small Walmart, the small stores and stuff, right? What I used to do, collect these. like probably 2,000 worth of data, dump it in Excel. Every phone call that you and I make, the state gets what we call fees for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can add these little pennies up, and that's a huge revenue that go to the state. This is a guy who just came out of nowhere because the telecom industry was deregulated. He started that company, and now he's over $1 billion company, right? Now, this is where I'm going with monopoly. With monopoly, the reason why I think people do monopoly in Africa, and this is where, again, another way of interfering with the economy, like the free market enterprise, is because in order for you to have control, you have to put something in my pocket. You have to bribe me for me to say, hey, I want you to shut, you know, Larry out of the rice importation business, right? So that
Right.
means I'm the only person who has it. Now, what hopefully I answer your question here. What they don't understand is that if you allow Larry to import rice, you allow me to import rice, right? You allow somebody else to import rice, you're collecting fees from the importation, the rice we're bringing in. That's one. The second thing, when we sell the rice, taxes, you collect taxes. They don't understand that, right? So, like, I don't think we're thinking in the essence of volume, of how much revenue it could bring to that little money you're collecting from me bribing you to tell you to shut the other people out. You're literally depriving yourself of so much revenue by riding on this monopoly thing where you only allow only few people to import rice, and they only pay you this, I don't know how much you're getting paid to bribe you, you know. And I think sometimes, they says sometimes when you know too much, is advantage and disadvantage. You suffer because you know the right things to be done are not being done. So by thinking about that, you stress yourself, but also you see the inefficiency of those that are in power are not doing what they're supposed to do. Right. I hope, and this is why we keep hoping, that people who understand, like especially at the central bank or the Ministry of Commerce, right? I think this is somebody we keep overlooking, but this is somebody with greater power to burst out this monopoly that we have in Liberia and just open the Liberian market up and just make it a free market enterprise for everybody. The Minister of Commerce have that ability. I hope he leverages that. But I think from a monopolistic standpoint, those are the things he needs to be looking at. Get rid of the rice monopoly, get rid of the fuel in monopolies, any even a Firestone monopoly. Firestone should not be the only person that export rubber out of that country, or is allowed to buy rubber from other people.
You know, they chased the
Remove all of
Chinese that were trying to do it. There was some Chinese company opening recently that were trying to also buy latex and whatnot. Do you know that it will close down? You can see the huge company they opened on going in Bung that they had opened. It's completely shut down.
yeah.
So why are we catering to these monopolies? Larry, what is your take on it?
Probably somebody's paying somebody to keep that stuff running, because some of the reasons why people have legal monopolies is if the cost to start the business is so high that
Right.
you want to give the company a chance to recover their money, then you give them legal monopolies. Usually that would happen with maybe like a power company, because power
Right.
company would need like
Right.
billions to get that operation up and
That's
running.
right.
So in order to give them an opportunity to recover the initial investment, you would give them maybe a 20 or 25-year monopoly. But then after that, and we saw this happen. I mean, even if you're in Texas right now, you don't have like one power company any longer, right? And we've seen
Right.
those monopolies that were established for power company have been dissolved. Even
Yep.
in the telecommunications sector, if you were in New York at one time, the major telecommunications company or phone company was called Bell, right?
Yeah,
AT&T.
my bell. I was part of that group. 9X, my bell.
Exactly. But Bell was taken apart, right? They broke them
Right.
apart. And because you also have a federal I can't think of the actual law name.
Antitrust.
Yeah, the antitrust laws. So the federal
Yep.
Yeah.
government will come after you in that instances. But I see the questions from actual factual. He was asking if
Yeah.
what I mentioned earlier, if that was the reason why we don't have like 30-year mortgages in Liberia. No, it's a combination of things, right? And in fact, I wrote something about that back in 2019, and I sent it over to, first I sent it to USID because I had a friend over at USID. And then he said, listen, Larry, this is great because it leads to job creation, it leads to economic growth. Let's see if we can get this over to the Development Finance Corporation. I sent it over to the DFC. The DFC reviewed it. They loved it. They said, okay, listen, we have a couple of issues with it. And the major issue is we don't have a credit reporting system in Liberia, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But I also knew I didn't put all of the ideas in the plan, but I do have a strategy in order to address that because I already reached out to the major credit reporting agencies, but it wouldn't set up shop in Liberia. And I'm talking about like Equifax, Experian, TransUnion,
Right?
Not the sovereign debt people like Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch Investor Services. No, just a regular credit bureau. But because our population is so small, it doesn't give them the opportunity to make a profit by setting up a system in that country, unless it was done regionally. But that's besides the point. The reason to answer the actual factual question why you don't have mortgages in Liberia is because interest rates. Interest rates in Liberia, Liberian economy is not stable. If you were to lend someone, give someone money for 30 years at an interest rate of say 8%, you saw when Weah came in 2018, interest rates shot up to almost 30%.
Yep.
You end up losing big time because interest rate is at 30%, but you loan someone money for 30 years at 7%. So the bank is in fact losing money. Remember now, the bank is not manufacturing money. They're using depositors' money to lend you that money. So that one reason, because of interest rates. The other reason is what you touched on. In terms of mortgages, bankers are interested in managing their risk. They charge you a certain interest rate on a loan based on your capacity to make that payment.
Mm-hmm.
But bankers don't go in there blind. They have to check your credit history, and we don't have the credit reporting mechanism in Liberia to do that.
Yeah.
So it creates that tremendous amount of risk. I can't lend money over to someone who I don't know their capacity to pay it back. And it will, in fact, lead to a whole lot of foreclosure. And banks are not in the business of managing real estate owned properties. They're not in the business of that. Those are all depositors' money. But there's a way around it. And that's why I wrote that paper in 2019, because I had studied it for years. And I took all of my investment banking experience and figured out how can we get this done in Liberia. And I kicked it around with other economists. And this is why when Boakai, came up with his economic advisor, he shouldn't have one person. He needs a team.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That was what Obama did when the financial crisis kicked off in 2007, 2008. Obama said, how can we deal with this stuff? One person cannot do the trick.
You need a team. Without
a team. So to answer the actual factual question, it's actually because there's a relationship between mortgage loans and interest rates. It's the fact that the Liberian economy is not stable. It creates a tremendous amount of risk, but it is still doable. But you have to be able to create financial instruments to get that done. So what I mentioned was the invention or the development of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was what led to the growth of mortgages in America. Because back then you also needed cash. Before Fannie and Freddie came along, you also needed 100% cash to buy your property. And real quick, 30 seconds to wrap up on this. And this is why the economist Hernando de Soto wrote that capitalism tends to work extremely well in the West, particularly in America, but it doesn't do so well in other countries that try it because we don't put the infrastructure in place to make it happen.
Larry, when you were mentioning Maynard Keynes, I can tell you, I was in school with some guys and said Maynard Keynes had all that theory, economic theory, but he left the colonization, all that capitalism. He didn't talk about ripping Africa off of millions and millions of gold and diamonds. He didn't put that in the equation. He said, if you move that from the European economy, all that theory he put together ain't going to work.
He didn't take into account the vulture capitalist.
Exactly.
People that swore to take out. Yeah, actual factual is the relationship between interest rate, the risk. and credit worthiness. Will collateral solve it? Yeah, collateral will certainly solve a portion of it, but then it leads to foreclosure, and banks not in the process of dealing with foreclosed properties.
Yeah.
So it has to be something more than just the collateral of the property. It has to be something more, and that it is that missing element that if you solve, you can grow the Liberian economy with 50,000, 100,000 jobs. And you know why that is important, real quick? Because you don't have highly technical people in Liberia. You have manpower. Your population is growing at a rate of 2.2% on a yearly basis. You put 100,000 people in the population grade every year. They're not highly educated. They're young, but they have manpower. So if you develop the construction sector, you can take a lot of those young people, put them to work in the construction sector. Why now you're developing your IT side of things? So you got to have this strategy, and you need to have the money.
Exactly.
And how do you track it? If you listen to Gabriel and some of the guys on Focus on Liberia long enough, Jimmy and Defu and Alex, you hear them talk about it. You have to tap into the resources.
Larry, there's someone who's suggesting you go work for Boakai government. You know,
that's what I said. We'll keep checking our list.
You know, I was in a meeting on Wednesday, and I'm not going to tell you who I work for. I was in a meeting on Wednesday, and the things were, because I was helping them develop something, but these guys have already developed something that deals with foreign direct investment. And I was like, I woke up early this morning and I sat in front of my computer and made a list of different software I need to learn to do what these guys were doing on Wednesday. It was so impressive. I'm telling you. So people are moving along. Liberia is at a standstill. We can get
exactly.
Yeah, look, we can make it. I mean, it's so insane that Liberia can be at the position it is today with all of the resources we have. We're not landlocked. We don't have very bad neighbors. You know, like Lesotho. Lesotho sits inside another country. Imagine Lesotho is growing. If Lesotho try to move goods, they have to go through another country.
Yeah.
But they're still, the economy is still growing. You know what Lesotho did? Lesotho took advantage of AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, right? So you know how Lesotho did it? We know the first globalization took place and a lot of companies left the US and went over to Asia because of cheap labor.
Right.
But there was a second wave of globalization when now the labor in Africa became cheaper than in China. And then Ed Royce and other people who came up with that bill, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, they made it possible so countries like Liberia can ship goods to the US without paying tariffs, the same thing we're talking about. So companies that started fleeing from Asia to Africa, and some of them landed in Lesotho. And if you look in Lesotho have people that are sewing clothes. Pretty soon, Jimmy, you'll be wearing clothes that says made in Lesotho. And I see that little fancy Tesla-looking shirt that Gabriel is wearing. It was something made in Lesotho too. But you know, I sat in a meeting with these guys. It was the former Benzogai Finley, some other people over in DC in a meeting, and I was telling them, I said, "Look, man, you guys can drive foreign investments to Liberia if you pay attention to AGOA. You can make that happen. You can open up manufacturing plants. You know, you can open up sewing. You don't need a whole lot of equipment for sewing. You know, sorry, man. 10 seconds. Are you aware that there was a company in Florida that set up a line of credit of like about $25 million to give Liberian farmers an opportunity to purchase, to lead to mechanized farming? They set up a line of credit of $25 million where you can actually take it on credit to buy equipment to go do farming in Liberia. 25 million. Great opportunity to boost the agriculture sector. Nothing happened to it.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
Somebody's asking you, gentlemen, someone asking us a question. It will block you a little bit, Larry, if I do it, but here it is. The question is, can one of you, it comes from Jimmy Gaga. Can one of you guys please give a layman's explanation on what can be done with the Liberian dollar, where the exchange rate is not as high to almost $200 against the U.S. dollars. I guess $10 is almost right now 2,000 Liberian dollars. That's why I think he's saying it. I think Larry said 1,009. That he's saying it's almost 2,000, which is the same thing. He said in 1998, I visited
190 LRDs to 1 USD.
How many? 1,000 what?
No, it's 190 LRDs.
190.
Yeah.
So $10 is 1,900. Yeah, I get it. It's almost $2. That's what he was saying. Okay. So he said he visited Ghana when the CDs were very high. I heard, Ghana had that, what they call that galloping inflation against the US dollar. And today I think they are less than 20 to 1.
12 to 1.
12 to 1. Okay, yeah, you just from there. Maybe there's a good question for you. He said, I visit Tunisia and their money is one of the strongest in Africa.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive.
He said, I visit Tunisia and their money is one of the strongest in Africa. I think number one against the US dollar. I think it's like 5 Tunisian dinar to $1 US dollar. So he's asking, wait a minute, how do we make our currency stronger? Gentlemen, have at it. Gabriel, you can come in first.
Yeah, I think, this is something we all say it on here again. It's production, because money is fiat currency. Your currency is as strong as the production level of your country, right? And he's right. Ghana has probably so far, so there's a country in the CFA, there's Nigeria, there's Liberia, there's Sierra Leone. So Ghana currency is stronger than all those CFA countries, the 8 countries. It's stronger than Liberia, it's stronger than Sierra Leone, it's stronger than Nigeria and Liberia, right? So if I said that right. So that's how strong it is. And a country's one currency is based on the production, right? We export everything. I mean, we import everything that we consume.
Right.
Right. So, and we are less we don't produce anything, right? So, to get the currency to be strong, we have to produce. You come to Ghana here, the quantity of food that is being produced here, forget the quantity of food. One of the reasons why Ghana currency, I think, as you mentioned, is so strong in their policy right now. I think I mentioned to somebody, they have what is called one district, one factory policy. It's a line item within their budget, right? Meaning for every district in the country, they're on a plan to create at least one factory. So what the government does is they do a quasi-private public. So let's say if you are someone who produces toilet tissue, you say you want to produce toilet tissue, you bring half of the money, the government bring half, or they will give you the guarantee to go borrow that money from a bank. Production based, their intention is to industrialize Ghana, right? To make it a very industrial country. So this is why their currency is being strengthened against the US dollar, because there's a lot of production that is happening here and the government is committing a lot of resources to that. Your currency is literally the peg against your currency, the strength against your currency is how productive your country is. Simple as that. We can look at the other stuff in terms of the inflation, the cost index, the exchange rate, but the biggest factor is your production level, because fiat currency, the paper you carry in your hand, is nothing but IOUs. And the strength behind that is how productive you are. So I think
buying power. That's right. Larry, you can want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, to what Gabriel is saying, part of the problem is we import everything. Gabriel is on point on that. Absolutely. We import everything. If we're growing everything that we need, we wouldn't have to be so worried about the currency being so low. In fact,
that's right.
When your currency is low, sometimes it's beneficial to you if you're actually manufacturing. This is why we have the Chinese renminbi or the Chinese yuan. You can see the Chinese are artificially lowering the value of the currency because it makes Chinese goods cheaper when they export to the US. The problem for Liberia is because we import everything, so things becomes extremely expensive in Liberia, and that's because we just have bad monetary policy, bad fiscal policies. But it's also because the DXY, right, the dollar itself is just strong. People are it's supply and demand. There are more people demanding the U.S. dollars because of some of the crisis going on overseas. What's going on with Ukraine and Russia? What's going on with with Hamas and Israel? What's going on in the Gaza, not just the Gaza, over in the Middle East?
Yemen.
People are actually demanding more U.S. dollar because it's a lot more stable. So there's nothing Liberia can do about that part. The U.S. dollar itself is just strengthening against other foreign currencies. What we can do is what Gabriel mentioned. We need to start manufacturing a lot of the things that we need to consume. If we start doing that, it will not be a stress for people in Liberia, because if you buy something from overseas, you need to pay in Liberian dollars. So you're going to have that demand for Liberian dollars also. But if we start growing everything we need to consume, that would be helpful. And even to Jimmy's point earlier, in terms of what we can do in terms of prices for certain commodities like rice and things like that. If you want to finance, if you're working for the Ministry of Finance, what you can look at is something called derivatives, right? You can use something called a forward contract. What that means, Jimmy, is, and Gabriel knows about this, is, Jimmy, you and I can have an agreement. I'm the finance minister of Liberia. You and I can have an agreement where we can have a forward contract. I can agree to buy maybe 1 million bags of rice from you at a fixed price at a certain date in the future. I would pay a contract price for it, but that price would be fixed. Let's say 16 bucks a bag. So if something were to happen in Ukraine and Russia and prices of rice were to shoot up to, like, say, $21 a bag, you and I have a contract in place where you're going to sell it to me for 16. Now, if price of rice didn't exceed and it were to fall, you're going to be in the money, but I will lose just the contract fee. But at least I know prices are going to be on that. So I can use derivatives and other, financial instruments to kind of manage, and not just agricultural products. You can also do
oil, gas.
Exactly. So those are all the financial instruments I'm talking about. Some of the things that the Ministry of Finance can use to help stabilize the Liberian economy. But so back to the point, the Liberian dollar is just weak because we don't have a strong economy. If we start having more remittances, more foreign direct investments, growing everything that we consume, maybe set up some manufacturing, and then, you can strengthen Liberian currency. You have to have a stable market for people to want Liberian dollars. I mean, the big advantage of having a devalued currency is if you drive tourists into the country, people will be happy, because if I'm in the US, I come with Liberian dollars, I have more money to spend in Liberia. I can enjoy my money in Liberia, So it's all the monetary policies, the fiscal policies that can make this happen, but you need people to be innovative. The same old strategies have never worked, and it's not going to work if you try to bring it back again. It's like putting lipstick on a pig.
Old wine in new bottles.
There are a lot of takeaways today. For me, we have to produce more. Whenever I think about this, I go back to Friesel and Talbot area, where he wanted us to produce almost everything we do. Matches, sneakers, you name it, we're producing it at that time.
I love that guy.
They were only looking at rice at the time. They were not looking at all those things today.
I love that guy so much. I love him so much because I think he was too intentional, and he knew what Liberia should be, and he was very intentional about it. Even, as I said, Ellen she's a big proponent of his policies. She liked his policies to the point she was moved. And this is why sometimes when you look at Liberia history, she was moving towards that, to the point they were telling her, the US are telling her, hey, you can't subsidize. She said sometimes, I don't agree with this capitalism policy, because in a way it kind of stops you from subsidizing your farmers. And this is something we need. Even the same thing with Syed, Antoinette Syed, she said that as well. right? She said
But
there's a
Gabriel,
lot we can. Yeah,
they subsidize their farmers. If you read about American agriculture, they do.
every year,
Listen, there are times
every
when
year.
you do that,
Yeah,
you know.
every year. Yeah,
And if we
every year.
listen to the IMF telling us not to do that, they're actually sabotaging our being self-sufficient,
Yeah, every
because
year.
it would keep us at this level that we're not producing what we eat. So there are things that you have to subsidize. China understand. Everybody else understand that. What's so hard that we can't understand? I'm not saying subsidize imports,
Yeah.
but local production definitely. There's nothing wrong with subsidizing it, because especially when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Um, the other takeaway I get from you gentlemen today, doing the same old thing, it doesn't work. Borrowing, because that's the big thing we saw. Um, Mr. 12 was dig hole, cover hole. Borrowing is not the deal. It's only time we should be borrowing is to build a factory or a new plant. And I think the other takeaway, what you guys talk about with the money, is we can't be heavily reliant on simply what extractive and agriculture, right? We need to diversify.
Mm.
Larry, for the last point before we go, and it goes to you too, Gabriel. Can we diversify? Do we investors? They look at your facilities, your infrastructure, electricity, water, and all of that. They look at your rule of law. They look at your labor pool. If it is qualified, do we have? Uh, I wouldn't say the potential, but are we moving in a direction that we can diversify our economy?
So uh, let me take a stab at this, and Larry can, you know, do the home run with it. The the Saudi Arabia, the Kuwaitis, the all the big oil producing countries. One thing that they have realized is that you cannot have natural resources forever, right? Even Saudi Arabia right now, this is why they are aggressively moving away from relying on oils, even though they have the Saudi Aramco, which is probably by market capitalization, the biggest company in the world, but they're moving away from it. They're moving away from being reliant on oil to diversify into tourism, right? Uh, you see the big push into sports, right? Now, as small as we are as a country, right? This is some like sometimes when you think people will have that kind of mindset where you don't just think for just 6 years or 12 years. You think the next 30 years, what do we want this country to be? What is going to be left of this country? How much oil do we have? Let's say we even have oil. How much oil will be left in our reserve or will be left in these shores for us to mine? How much gold? And how much longer can we keep digging our earth? Right? So in with that mindset, with that thought backdrop, this is where now you start thinking about diversifying. What your biggest asset, any country's biggest asset, is not the natural resources, but its people, the citizen in our country. That's your biggest asset. How do we start investing in people to get them away from being reliant on the extractive industry, which is the
Right,
diamond, gold, and these other things, to going into tourism, like we talked about the Upwork, or what is we driving foreign direct investment, where people can set up shop and call centers in our country. What are the things you need to be doing to pivot away from this extractive industry?
right,
And I say this because I think as a country we need to have regardless of what president is sitting in our chair as the president, we need to have a collective vision as a country
hmm
that this is where we want, regardless of who comes in. Yes, there's way
exactly,
you might certain things you might say, you know what, these are the things we need to do this year within this decade. I would take A, B, and C and just do that in my presidency. My time's up. I'm leaving. At least the country is on one agenda. But from a diversification standpoint, I would say there's an lane. We need to think about ourselves beyond the the gold. the oil and whatever else natural resources we have to maybe 30, the next 50 years. And the biggest asset that I think we have to deploy are investing in our citizens, because they will be able to shift that future
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
100. Larry.
Yeah, I think what Gabriel just touched on, we suffer from that resource curse, right? That whole thing about having way too many resources. Because when you have so many resources, you can put a VC government in there. It will still look like they're doing something, because all they have to do is just do a whole bunch of concession agreements and just sell all of your resources, not knowing that your resources is not endless, right? Because we've turned into a rentier nation, right? We tend to rent all of our resources, even the fisheries. Renting, I mean, the concept of renting our ocean to people like Senegal, who had depleted, they depleted their resources.
Yes.
And people thought it was such a good strategy by renting your ocean to people like Senegal, who've depleted their resources. And that's what happens when you have way too many resources and you don't end up putting competent people in place. They would just end up doing a whole bunch of concession agreement. Concession agreement has never developed a country. I haven't seen it anyway. You know, it just doesn't work, because what you end up doing is you're giving more credence to people who are coming in and pulling things like your palm oil or oil palm out of the country, and they're making billions off of it, and you're only getting pennies.
Yep.
Palm oil is in everything. The orange soda, the ivory soap, pretty much everything you use out there, palm oil is in it.
That's right.
Nestle makes billions from cocoa. And they're still promoting, to a certain extent, child labor in countries. You need to diversify your economy to survive. And, you know, there's this saying that when the U.S. economy sneezes, right, the rest of the world catches a cold. When the U.S. economy sneezed in 2007 with the financial crisis, every economy out there suffered. The Liberian economy suffered tremendously in 2007, 2008. When Lehman Brothers failed, it suffered tremendously. Fast forward a few years later, and you see, when we just focus on these extractive sectors, because when Ebola came in through FOL back in December, around Christmas time in December 2013, when it hit in 2014, all of these people who are out there renting our resources, the concessionaires, they fled the country. What happened? The economy pretty much collapsed.
That's right.
What actually helped the country survive, the U.S. pumped, I think this was the period of time when the U.S. pumped the most money into Liberia. Remittances hit its highest level ever at that period in time. You have to diversify your economy, because historically, every 3 to 4 years, something happens globally that impacts countries that relies on just extractive sectors. When Ebola left, what happened? A few years later, by 2015, 2016, Liberia was declared Ebola free. What happened? Boom, by March of 2020, we got hit with COVID. Every few years, something happens.
Yeah.
Right at the end of COVID, what happens? Now you see the war in Ukraine and Russia that is having an economic impact to all of the countries out there. And then fast forward from 2020, 2021, boom, you have Israel, Hamas, leading to what has now spread out to like a proxy war, because you have Iran coming in, you have people firing rockets from Yemen, hitting U.S. ships, and this thing can blow up into a big giant mess. Think about it. Every 3 to 4 years, something happens.
Yep.
We are focused on the extractive sectors with concessions. It's not going to work. You have to diversify your economy to survive. You can diversify it by boosting tourism. You can diversify it in your agriculture sector. You can diversify in light manufacturing. The man that I talked about in Houston, he wants to come there and train people how to, not just train them, but he wants to share ideas on how to use solar panels to generate electricity. So agriculture, tourism, construction, light manufacturing, those are all things you can use to diversify your economy and not focus so much on the extractive sectors. But you know, Jimmy, to close up on this, you need money. Money is the root of all evil, but it sure as hell can solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So you need money.
Yeah.
You know, and I like what my man Joe Munn mentioned earlier. You know, you can, in fact, Joe, you're right. You know, you can develop the financial sector to set up companies in Liberia to deal with some of the risks that I mentioned. That's what happened in the U.S. I mean, look, I started in the financial sector when I was like a teenager, fresh out of Liberia, and I stayed there for about 40 years. So I've seen it. I've seen it. Like my brother over here, Gabriel, this guy, don't Mike Gabriel sitting over here. That guy's a big shot in the banking sector. He be playing all nice and cool and coy.
No, and that is why my last question for you two bankers, and it's one of it's one of our colleagues always mention it, Weah King. He says, what, he talk about why all this money we have in the diaspora. And Americans ask me this too. They feel we who Liberians in the diaspora, we're not doing nothing to leverage our wealth in Liberia. Why you guys think we're not? What is stopping us from pooling our money and investing in it and becoming a force in Liberia? Is it because we're selfish? Is it because we're scared? Why? Why can't we do it? Because I'm asked this all the time by people from the Black Caucus. Why are we not putting our money in there?
I think it's just a matter of one, fear, but two, lack of trust to work with each other. So let's say hypothetically you and Jimmy created a fund, a company here to say, hey, we're raising maybe 2 million. We're only requesting minimum investment from people 500. I mean,
Right.
maybe 1,000 or up to
let's say
5,000,
1,000.
right?
To get 2 million, how many people you need? 200,
Right.
1,000.
Exactly.
Do that.
So let's say I know Larry has a 40 years banking career. He's touched some of the most complex financial instrument you can think about, right? I know you have an engineering background and you have, so I will give you guys 5,000 and say, you know what? If you say you're gonna do maybe 5% return,
Right.
perfect, right? Because I know the background you guys have. But the question becomes, how do you collectively articulate that? Go on a show, like you said, go on some of these shows we have and pitch that ideas and see how many people invest in it. Now establish that company, go to Liberia and say, okay, we're raising, this is what private equity and stuff and venture capitalists do over here. They raise fund and say, okay, we're just going to go target just the real estate industry in Liberia. All we're going to do is just take this money, use it as a what we call collateral, and borrow against it at whatever one of those banks in Liberia, and use that money we borrow now to build houses and then sell those houses, or build houses and then rent those houses. That's pooling money works right there. The rent collection you take from that, you now continue to pay every month. People like myself who invested $5,000. You say even if it's interest on it is $50 every month, it's okay because I know at the end maybe you say 5 years. Hey, at the end of 5 years, we'll have pay you all your interest and we'll give you your 5,000 back. Simple as that. The thing is, the fear and the lack of trust. I think that's what it is, right? And I will say this quickly and I will end. The same reason why we're not doing that is the same reason why um, qualified people, which I think people in the diaspora like us, are sitting on the sideline and pulling and folding our hands on our chest like this and say, you know what, the chaos that's going on in Liberia, I don't want to be part of it, right? Well, if we sit on the sideline, in as much as the skill sets and the resources that we have, guess who's going to be running the country? Right?
They're available.
And we suffer exactly. We suffer from that. We're going to be here complaining. But anyway, long story short, I think the two reasons I think is lack of trust and just the fear of trusting um, our own people. Now, turn that another way around. Let's say another.
How about the heavy lifting? Is it also maybe we don't want to do the heavy lifting, or like you said, just a lack of trust?
So let me turn this around. Let's say let's turn this around. Let's say you guys were maybe one African American and one white guy came on this show and said we've established a fund and we're gonna do. You will see the kind of money Liberian will dump into that, right? The same thing happened in what is called a smart AI, right?
Yeah.
So you will see that it's just trust for our own people and people being able to do that. So I think for me, I just fear
That's good.
and,
That's good.
and lack
Larry,
of
have
trust.
at it for your party.
You see what Gabriel just said. In fact, what Jimmy Garga, Jimmy G,
Yeah, Jimmy
what he just
Gaga.
mentioned in the chat. That's it. Case closed in terms of what he just mentioned. It's that lack of trust in the system, and you put it up there, you can't see me, but I'm still talking. I'm still here hiding somewhere, Jimmy. I'm still talking. But he's absolutely correct. It's the lack of trust. That's why, and Jimmy, regardless of the financial system you're in, there will always be someone who would try to game the system.
Yeah.
Even here in the U.S., you look at some of the major financial fiasco, like the even not Warren Buffett. Who was the guy who was the head of the stock exchange who died in prison, man? Who ran one of the biggest scam, the most recent scam?
Bernie, what his name? Bernie
Madoff.
Madoff.
Bernie Madoff. You see how Bernie Madoff tried to take advantage of the system? Even guys like Joseph Jett, young African American brother, man, he was big with Kid Peabody. He found a glitch in the accounting system and tried to take advantage of it. And I can give you some of the big names people, man, in the financial sector over the years that have done it. Even the Queen's Bank, she used to bank at Barings Bank. It was a young stockbroker that caused that bank to collapse. So you will always have people trying to game the system, but every financial system has 6 parts, right? And one of the major parts of the financial system is the regulation, the regulatory part of it.
Yeah.
But if you can't prosecute people in Liberia, you're not going to have people investing. It's not going to happen. It is because that people trust the U.S. financial system to prosecute people. That's why when Michael Chang, the former finance minister, and you've been on the show, you heard me talk about it, and I followed this case. I'm still following it. The former finance minister from Mozambique, he ran a $2 billion scam in Mozambique. It caused the Mozambican economy to collapse. The IMF didn't even know this guy was, cutting deals at that magnitude that Mozambique lost their credit ratings with IMF and other people. And Michael Chang, now today, he's sitting in the prison over in New York because he touched the U.S. banking system and he was extradited. They pulled him from South Africa. He was on his way through South Africa, and the U.S. had a warrant on his arrest, and they grabbed him. He's over there. He fought it for 2 years since 2018. This guy was fighting the extradition to come to the U.S. The U.S. finally grabbed him. So to Jimmy's point, you have to address that whole issue of regulation. Mm-hmm. There's a solution to it. And it doesn't rely on the Liberian banking system. Just how the U.S. grabbed Michael Chang, you would have to use, like you said, you talk about Edward Jones, the brokerage house. If you do anything shenanigan with investors' money from the U.S. using the U.S. banking system, I don't care where you are, the U.S. is going to come and grab you. So one solution to what you just mentioned, and I posted something in our private chat, the FOL chat. That was when I did that study and the research back in 2019, that was my major concern because I addressed that issue. That's why the Development Finance Corporation was looking to kind of tap into this project. But he's absolutely correct. Nobody, if the government is not trustworthy, nobody's going to put money in Liberia. Mm-hmm. Because I think LBDI is insolvent right now. Because I think LBDI has loaned so many investors, so many depositors money to people who haven't paid it.
Yes, there's a problem.
And if there was a run on the bank to LBDI doesn't have the money to pay everybody right now. That's why some people put money in LBDI. They can't get it out right away. There's a wait period because they're taking Peter's money to pay Paul. But yeah, man, I know we had the 5 o'clock mark.
Yep.
And I have another
It's been grand. As somebody said, I hope somebody in the government is taking notice, But thank you for joining me this through Saturday. We can only wish that things will get brighter and that we will find a fix to the trust issues and the rule of law. Once we get the rule of law right there, I'm told that everything else will fall back in place. But until next week, gentlemen, I wish you all well. And as we say, regardless of where we are, we still remain all Liberian.
We are Liberian. We are Liberian. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.